Yay.
Can you hear me?
I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yes. These things are a bit like seances. Or like,
Yeah, I understand.
are you there? Oh. I am getting a mic though, so hopefully that helps.
Hey, you got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Oh, so would you like to introduce yourself for my viewers?
Okay, well, my name is Catherine Wybell, and I'm an author of several different high fantasy series that range in different age groups from young adult, new adult, all the way up to adult level.
Nice. Now, when when did you start working on these series or in writing in general?
Well, I guess I was always a person who, when I was little, always had to tell stories and write, so kind of never stopped in many senses, but didn't actually take the time to begin writing a whole novel until I was kind of heading into college. I had big aspirations to come and develop this book and was super passionate about it. Of course, I wrote the first 2 chapters, entered college 4 years later, had to go back pretty much from scratch because, get 4 years older and learn more and advance. And so I had to pretty much started writing, I guess I could say, almost after my college career.
Yeah. So would you say that when people say that younger writers don't really have the ability to pin down when they're actually ready until after they've sort of lived a little bit?
I mean, it's one of those things, it's when you're young, I think you should always be encouraged to follow your passions. And as anything, practice makes perfect. So if you start writing at a younger age, even though your first works will probably not be your best pieces, it's giving you the experience, especially it's challenging you to finish a project that you start. And for many people, the concept of just writing a book is something that is almost daunting. So I would always encourage them to do that. And if they have some perfect plot or perfect idea, they can always come back to it and flesh it out at a later time.
Yeah, because even though I got started when I was pretty young, but it was you have to resign yourself to writing lots and lots of rubbish.
Yes.
Darn it. And one of the people I worked with there, I would have to say one of the best pieces of advice they gave me was write for the trash can first. Would you agree?
Right for the trash can first. I mean, I actually would say, always challenge yourself to do the best you can. And I always like to have the dreams of this next novel is going to be the one that makes it huge.
Yeah.
Why not? But with that understanding, yes, you're going to have some bad novels, you're going to have some bad writing, and just that's part of it. You have to be ready to accept that fact.
Yes. Because even though we all think that, oh yeah, this is going to be the end all to be all, this will probably be the best thing I've ever done, most of the time that first draft is not going to be.
Oh, yes. It takes me probably about 30 drafts even now just to polish everything up and then go back and forth with betas and editors and everything just to make sure, you get it as best as you can.
Yes, because even if you do find it, and even sometimes going into a bookstore and seeing your own work, do you find sometimes that you still nitpick at yourself
Oh, yeah. I
seeing
was
your
going to
own stuff
say,
in print?
anytime I have to reread my first novel, couple novels, it's for me kind of harsh on the ears because I know my writing now is totally different from what was back then. Not to say those stories weren't good, they got some nods, but even still, it's you always want to be getting better. That's your always challenge. So again, going back to an earlier work, it's kind of shocking. You're like, wow, I could have approached this totally different and it would have sounded so much better. But at the time you were like, this is amazing.
So would you definitely say that you are of the philosophy that art is never truly perfectly finished, it's just simply abandoned?
I feel like that has to be my philosophy because I'll keep going back and nitpicking and adjusting if I could. But sometimes you just have to say, okay, this is as good as it's going to get, so I can then move on to a new project and, make improvements there and come out with you know, a better novel than the one before.
Yeah. Yes, because you must do it more and do it better, and that's the only way that you actually get better. I think is by doing it to completion as much as possible. Would you
Yes.
concur?
Yes, I do.
And speaking of doing it and doing it better, you have you said you have two beginnings to
I
series.
have 3 series.
Okay.
I was talking to you about my newest
Okay.
couple. But yeah, my first series is 4 books. It's already completed. And that was that one. When I go back to, it's kind of like, wow, well, I was there. But, I still love the books and I still love the stories, and people seem to appreciate them too. That was the Incarn Saga, and those are for new adults and they're a shifter fantasy. But now I have 2 different series that I'm actively putting out. One is for young adults. It's just an fun adventure series called the Jed Chronicles. The first one's the 12 Tasks. And the other one is a series entitled The Guardian Speaker, and it's adult novellas all about Nordic mythology. So think of the Viking era myth.
Which piqued my interest because I am a mythology guru. Like I will go back and I will study. I mean, all kinds of ancient mythology, and partly because I'm somewhat of a linguist and a lexiconographer, and so I like study old languages and stuff. And a lot of these come from obscure oral histories. What, if any, obscure research did you do that you felt lended itself to you shaping your personal take on the mythology?
Well, kind of like you, I have for as long as I can remember, I had a passion for older myth and mythology, and a huge section of my personal library is stocked with encyclopedias of world mythology and their source materials and Icelandic sagas. And so, especially with my newer works, I do spend a good bit of time going back to some of these source materials and to draw inspiration. My adult, like I said, my adult Nordic mythology series is heavily invested, and I've spent hundreds and maybe even thousands of hours just reading these books and researching and everything. And so that one's definitely integrated with as true to the original text as I can be in some ways. And then my young adult one, to kind of counterbalance, it's just fun to try to pull and draw from maybe more obscure characters or creatures or beings and reintroduce them to people who probably either have not heard about them or have not seen them in that way before.
Yeah. So do you think that being able to go back to original source material or suss out things that are not used now so much because people don't have the verisimilitude, I think, that some of us have to be able to go back and look at those things. Do you think that's helped you avoid things like cliche traps?
Yeah, I kind of tell people if they're interested in writing fantasy, it's good to know where they all originate. So if you're writing something on fairies, go to Celtic mythos and learn about that. If you're writing something about mermaids, make sure you go back to the European myths and kind of learn what they were and see, especially with things like mermaids, they weren't nice entities in the beginning. Neither
No,
were fairies. They were actually, for most part, very scary, dark entities. And then how they evolved to, I guess, the Disney versions and these, more romanticized versions. And then you can decide where along that line you want to keep true or totally side tangent to kind of flip the script.
Yeah. And what in any way would you say you have sort of innovated on the old and brought it forward?
Innovate. Well, like I said, I like to go and find maybe the most obscure snippet of mythology and figure out a way to make that maybe a main point of a story. And for instance, my adult Viking series, one of the big focal points are these entities called Fuja, and they're your animal guardian spirits. Everybody gets one, and depending on your personality, depends on what form it takes at birth, your birth, and then they live with you throughout your life, and when you die, they disappear. But that's something I don't think a lot of people have written yet. And so that's why I wanted to focus on that as kind of like one of my core pieces of mythology that I'm bringing back to, I guess, the modern world.
Yeah. And now, looking at your young adult fantasy, was there a reason you went for writing young adult fantasy? Was that a marketing decision, or was that dictated by the story itself?
Well, that particular series was one that its, I guess, origin, so to speak, was kind of started being developed when I was probably younger than the character. The character starts at 13. I was probably younger than that when I started conceiving of her. And through, I guess, my sister and my imaginary play as children, we developed this grand multiverse and all these worlds and had our alter egos and all these characters and their interrelationships and different villain types and all these kind of things. And so I wanted, ever since I was little, wanted to find a way to share that with the world. And so that's why that series is actually why I wanted to become a writer. And even though I wrote a series first, now that I feel more comfortable in my writings, again, practice makes perfect, feeling a little better and more confident that I can represent it well, I've gone back to it. But young adult always was going to work for it because I wanted to show this character as she progresses through her teen years and all her adventures. So young adult was just perfect for that.
So it was more dictated by the story itself.
Yes, yes.
Just, you know, a decision of, because a lot of people, especially now that, you know, we've got the innovation of self-publishing, but they look to a lot of the time the traditional publishing metadata as far as how to promote themselves, and have a tendency to fit themselves into boxes like, okay, well, I only need to write, you know, this type of thing. Would you say that your philosophy is just tell the story and do it as best as you can, regardless of how people are marketing themselves?
Yeah, it depends on what aspect of the story. Obviously, there are certain things you have to keep true, which again is if you incorporate violence or sexual content, or depending on how swearing, if you're a writer who likes to do that, that does dictate your age bracket you can market into. But outside of that, yeah, I'm a person who I want to tell these stories and be true to the story themselves. And so I may not fit exactly in one kind of genre or another, but I do slot in different age brackets because I can tell by the content.
Yeah.
It kind of defines that.
And would you say that being able to balance that for yourself, whether you write in young adult, or being able to sort of, I guess, be able to move from multiple genres and write it speculative fiction, would you say that gives you a broader audience to write to?
I think yes, and it works both ways. You can get a broader audience, obviously, because you can get people who are interested maybe just in the more adult, grittier stuff, or some of the younger kids, and obviously young adults. But the downside is when you market yourself as an author, people like to fit you in a box. So it's easier to market yourself if you just come out and say, hey, I'm young adult, all my stuff's young adult, that's what I do. And so for marketing purposes, it does hinder you. It's like climbing up a hill when it's raining. It's a little hard to do, but it's not impossible. It's just, it's not the easy route to take.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that with the innovation of self-publishing, and you're self-published yourself,
Yes, correct.
and with that innovation, I think that a lot of freedom has been lended to authors being able to work in multiple genres and, present themselves as people who work in speculative fiction, which is, of course, technically you could call all fiction that, because all fiction has elements of each genre in it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that eventually that rigid marketing standard that readers have fit authors and themselves into the box of, do you think the box will eventually implode and not be there anymore?
I mean, that's hard to say, mainly because when someone's interested in a certain niche, they like to know, when they're shopping around, that what you're offering is that niche. And so if you want to find something that's in one genre and you're just trying to keep it, and if you don't have those lines, it's kind of hit or miss. But as an author, it's more freeing if you don't have to, box yourself in. So I would hope it would lessen, but there still needs to be clear ways of defining, hey, if this is what you're into, yes, this works. If this is not what you're into, know before you buy, because then you'll get an angry reader.
Yes.
No one wants an angry reader.
No, they don't, because we need them.
Exactly.
Now, if there was a way that I think if there was a way that writers could find a way to be more subtle, I guess, in their transitions between genres in their content, I think that would probably lessen the anger.
I could agree that. Yes.
Yeah. So, would you tell us first a little bit about 12 Tasks, book one?
Okay, so the 12 Tasks, kind of going back, that is the first book of the Jed Chronicles, which is my young adult series. I'm putting it out there so no one gets angry and thinking it's my adult.
Right.
But no, it's just like I said, it's a fun action adventure series full of fantasy and just kind of fun, quirky characters. The premise is that there are 12 worlds in this universe that contain magic, and any entity that utilizes magic has to exist on one of those 12 worlds. Now, periodically, since I guess you could say the dawn of time, there have been some kind of force or something that will affect the balance of the universe. And if the balance is affected too much, the risk is all life can be lost. During those moments, a prophesied hero, or heroine in this case, usually appears, and they've always been called the Jed. And there are certain aspects that they all have, certain characteristics. And so at the beginning of the story, my main character, she's an 13-year-old girl, just kind of awakens on a world that's not Earth, because that's where she's from. And Earth is not one of the magic planets. So it's pretty shocking to her. And she quickly is told that she might be this next Jed, which the downside is, if she is, this big war, this big darkness, this big evil, whatever you want to term it, is around the corner. So the first book is she has to go around and actually complete different tasks on each of the worlds to kind of prove that she is this next Jed. And then doing so, claim one of the items of the prior Jed. So it's just a setup book. It's kind of fun. And, I hope any readers enjoy it.
Yeah. And I would have to say that now, do you already have an idea of how long the series is going to be?
Yes, it will probably be between, I think it's 7 or 8 books, depending on how I split them. I mean, obviously, as I write, if the story needs to have another manifest, sure, but it'll be probably around 7 or 8 books in length.
So, you as a writer, and the fact that you write fantasy series, a lot of people and especially here on these interviews, I've discovered that a lot of people have a tendency to be a hybrid between engineers and gardeners. What would you say that your writing process looks like? Do you plan it out all the way, like down to the bullet point, or are you fly by the seat of your pants and let it all come out in the wash later?
It's well, for me, it's been interesting. All my series so far, and a few that I've conceived of, and haven't gotten to yet, uh, kind of starts with a spark and then a quick bang, and so all of a sudden it'll hit me, and I'll know the main characters, the main world design, the main plot, how long the series is going to go, the highlights of each book, and so, in that sense, yes, I have things kind of already set in place before I start writing. Now, as I write, I let the story take me on different routes. And so I've had characters develop or kind of call themselves into reality that I didn't expect, subplots that I didn't know develop. But the core premise is already there, kind of like, I guess you could say, the main structure of the house, and then all the decorations come in later.
Yeah. And so, would you say that giving it that freedom helps to keep you out of any kind of writer's block or anything like that, because you don't keep it so entirely rigid, but you know sort of where you're going?
Thankfully, I haven't really had too many hiccups with writer's block. It's for me, yeah, I guess it keeps it moving periodically. I just know for me, when I do have hiccups or kind of moments where my writing slows, it's not really where I am in the story in a sense, is what type of writing I'm doing. For instance, if I'm setting up a big scene, I love action scenes. If I'm setting up the scene, that sometimes just will drag a little slower. And then the action scene, I can like write really quickly, and I'll blink an eye, come out with like 5 or 6 pages, and then I'll do it again. So it kind of goes in little waves when I write.
Yeah. And some people say that they have a tendency to be able to pump out things like a battle scene in an afternoon and then take 3 weeks to get their character from the front door to the tree in their front yard.
Yep, I can relate to that. I can definitely relate to that. But yeah, and I also noticed when, since I do write series, every time I approach the beginning of a book, I'm a little slower because there is that tendency where when you're writing a book 2 or 5 or whatever, you have to approach it as someone's going to pick it up somewhere, not realizing it's not book one. And you still have to reintroduce the characters, the world, and everything in a way that all your other readers are not bored to death. So a lot of that redundancy kind of gets boring to me. And especially when I'm trying to find new ways to say the same thing for the 11th time. But once you get through that and actually get into the new part of the story, it goes a lot quicker.
Yeah. So would you say that that makes it a lot, that you would agree that it makes it a lot better when writing a series and doing that, that you set up each of your stories as almost standalone, in the sense that you're able to give your readers micro goals that they need to achieve, and that helps to move the series along, but keep them from getting lost, like you said, if they happen to pick up a book and not realize that it's the first one.
I mean, yes, you do want to have your sub story arcs of each book, and you want to complete it, whatever that is, complete it. And then I think authors at that point have two ways to go from it. Some shut the door, and then you can open it up the next one totally fresh on the subsequent book. Or others, kind of like me, I do, and again, some people don't like this, I do like the cliffhanger endings. I do. I like that hook. So, I've had commentary, good and bad, that people like or dislike that concept, but I do like the hook and then let them be impatient until the next one comes out. That's a good thing. It's if you're already ready as a reader to read the next one. So, but yeah, you should have a story arc and you should complete at least the main goal, or whatever, for that book.
Yeah, because I find that it has a tendency to get a bit exhausting, not only for you as, not only for people as a reader, but sometimes for you as a writer, to not have some sort of micro achievement in a series. And I think that's what a lot of writers have a tendency to have a problem with when it comes to what they call the marathon in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
When writing a series, would you say you've had any kind of experience with that, especially juggling two series simultaneously? Would you say you've had that issue, and what, if anything, did you do to get over that?
Well, I guess for me, it's there's a difference between writing a full length book, and I do write some meaty full lengths, versus writing my novella series. With my full lengths, I'm pretty good about, here's my end goal, we're going to achieve it, here's how we do it, and it has that nice little arc. With my novellas, because they run 10 to 11 chapters, I do want to have some point, but I do have to, for me, it's a little more challenging to reach that point when you only have 10 chapters to do it. And you still want, all that dynamic middle to kind of flesh out that space. So I think sometimes, and I'll find out, since again, I'm actively putting that series out. I've written 9 of them, though I'm only putting out the second one later this month for the novellas. So I just want to make sure, I haven't got a lot of feedback yet because it's still early on in the release, but I want to make sure I do have those little points to get across and feel like, yes, you're satisfied, that was a complete story. But I still want to know the bigger thing.
Yeah. So would you say that keeping things active, for you as a writer, endeavoring to keep things as active as possible in the story, is something that helped you to keep from hitting any kind of a lull or a snag in the middle of writing your series?
I mean, it goes back to pacing. You want to have that right pacing. You want to have those moments where you can take a breath, especially if you have high action scenes. You don't want to run it the whole thing. You want to have those moments. You want to have the commentary. You want to have character development. But yeah, you want to like figure out how that right pacing is for each story. So depending on, again, shorter or longer, that pacing may have to be adjusted so you still get that nice flow. But trying to maintain that flow kind of helps prevent you from getting snagged, I think.
Now, moving on to The Guardian Speaker, Volume 1. Could you give us a little bit of background on that?
Okay, so that is my adult Viking fantasy. And that series, that premise, I just want to immerse the readers into Nordic mythology. And we're talking Yggdrasil, the World Tree, the 9 realms, the whole of it. The first one starts on Midgard, so Earth, and it bases around this character, which is different for me. I'm more comfortable writing the warrior type woman. So I wanted to challenge myself and pick a character that's not confident, who doesn't really believe in herself, but she's special in different ways. She's born with the gift to see everyone's Fulgia, which are their animal spirits. And because of that, she actually does talk to hers. The counter side of it is everybody in the community, minus possibly her family, thinks she's insane because she talks to herself. And so she's very meek, very mild. She's considered an outcast. And in the first novella, she bumps into or comes across this other character who has a similar ability. The problem is he's also coming with a warning that all humanity is about to crumble, and he needs to figure out why to stop it. The problem is, being again a Viking culture, he's brought in as a slave, and he's not hers to free, and so she has to make some quick decisions and figure out from there, and all the ripple effects that go from there. But yeah.
And I'm not going to give spoilers, but with shifting to adult fantasy, a lot of people talk about, especially being especially being a woman and being able to write action scenes, and a lot of people for some reason have this perception that we don't necessarily enjoy
Oh no.
writing gore and violence and things like that, which, I mean, having 5 brothers, that was something that I was completely immersed in my entire life, because obsessions with Bob Anderson and Lord of the Rings and things like that. But But what would you say that you found most enjoyable about writing that kind of subject matter, and how do you make it non-gratuitous but integral to the story?
Well, I mean, I guess it's something of medieval, because all my series right now deal with high fantasy and medieval style warfare in some way, shape, or form. And so when I was younger, again, creating this alter ego that ended up becoming the character for the 12 tasks. She was able, she learned sword fighting and archery and all these different skills, which are very important, for her character. And I wanted to, again, wanting to be her, wanted to learn that. And so at a relatively younger age, I started becoming a competitive archer. And so I do, yeah. And like,
Oh,
yeah, so, and like, I learned axe throwing, and I have a bunch of swords in my house that I have a whole wall of. Haven't figured out how to do that yet, have books on it, but would love a teacher in that. But I do like to immerse myself
hang
in it
out.
because, yeah, because that makes it a little more real when you know the movements, when you know what is plausible, what's not, and then you can kind of write. I think that helps me write a little better when it comes to some of the battle scenes. But no, I love action scenes,
Yeah,
be it running through the woods from and evading danger to actually confronting a nemesis. So
yeah. And so you would definitely say that creating as immersive of an experience for yourself personally and getting in there and getting hands on, being able to learn all of those things. Especially like for me, like I said, having five brothers and them having friends and people with horses, and being able to actually learn the logistics of having to hold things in your hands and navigate a large animal while holding a shield
exactly.
and a javelin. Would you say that and becoming a competitive archer, when you said that, I was like, oh my god, because um, same. But would you say that creating that kind of an immersive experience for yourself, would you recommend to other writers to go out and do things like that so that it will make their fight scenes more believable?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's one of those things, write what you know, that helps it become, once you know something, you know the limitations, you know the capabilities of it. So even if you decide, no, I don't want to be a competitive archer, no, I don't want to wield a sword, what's the point? But maybe you find someone who can teach you a class, or
Yeah,
you take something, so you just get even just a little bit of the know-how and realize, where you actually pull the bowstring and all this kind of stuff can again give you just that little detail that makes it that just that much more real. Wow, I'm getting tongue tied.
it's okay. Because, but who would not find all of that stuff fun though?
I don't know.
And I think once people like actually delved into it, they would find out how much fun it actually is.
Oh yeah, and when I started learning archery,
Yeah,
again, I was doing it based in my mind of trying to become my alter ego.
yeah,
And so I'm showing up there, and there was a whole slew of new people because the first Lord of the Rings movie had come out. So everybody
yeah.
was going to be Legolas. And I was like, no, I'm myself. I'm going to be me, just some alter ego me. But this is my goal. You can be Legolas.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you can be the elf prince from Lord of the Rings, and I'm just trying to figure out how all this works and possibly become a badass at it.
There you go. You
Yeah,
should.
exactly. Because I mean, like I said, who doesn't find all of that stuff fun?
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Plus, I mean, you could tell people that yeah, I can throw an axe, or because you never know when you're going to need those things.
I know. I tell people if the apocalypse starts tomorrow, I think I'm pretty confident to an extent on, survivability.
Exactly, exactly. I could destroy some zombies.
Yes.
Oh, so as a and I think that makes it so much better when, as not only just as a writer but as a reader, you can tell if somebody is coming at it from a more academic
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, and you're like, you've never done this in your life. What if any stories have you read where you felt that way?
Uh, it's less the stories. I will admit most of my reading is ancient epics and again mythology source material. So um, about 95% of what I read is sagas,
Yes.
ancient epic poetry. But that usually comes to play when I see like TV shows or movies. You know, I can see something I'm like, that's not how, no, that's not how it works. No, that's wrong. Please don't do that again.
Feel like you've obviously never done this in your life. Like why? Um, so now, as on writing, when you are approaching putting, converting your blood into ink, um, do you have to have a specific, space to do it in, or aesthetics around you, or anything that aid you to doing that? Because I know some people they work so hard to curate things like aesthetic boards and playlists and things like that because they feel like that's what they need to be ready to do this. Would you say that you at all fall into that, or can you do this anywhere?
I do have some parameters. Like I'm a person who always likes to work from the house because I like silence. When I'm creating new material, it has to be totally silent. So I can't do the coffee shops, can't do anything like that. But outside that, I don't need a lot. I try to keep a clear desk because clear desk, clear mind, theoretically.
Exactly.
But that's not always the case. I'm a person who is a scheduler, so I like to come in and be like, "This is my time from here to here to write," and I can just get in that mindset pretty quickly, um, just to write. So I don't need a lot of prep work, but complete silence is, I think, the one thing that I'm like, can't work around people. I'm sorry. I'll
Yeah.
see you after my writing is done.
Yeah. Do it with the door closed. Like Stephen King says, when he goes for a first draft, a lot of the time he'll just shut himself off until it's completely done, and then he was like, draft two, I can have the door open. Would you say?
Exactly. Yeah.
And on thinking about that, he says that he has, when he approaches a story, a lot of the time, he has an ideal reader in mind. His specifically is his wife Tabitha. Do you personally have an ideal reader that you write for, or do you do this for yourself first? Are you your ideal reader?
I am definitely the latter. I am my ideal reader at this point. Not to say again, approaching it with readers or a type of reader in mind is again helps with marketing later on. But for me, again, I'm a person where I let the story tell itself, and I don't try to hinder myself by saying, okay, that may or may not be something a reader likes. Again, that could hinder me from finding potential readers or make it that much harder because I don't already have the ideal reader and market in mind. So it goes both ways. I'm definitely the latter, though. I kind of let the story tell itself and hope there is someone else like me in the world that enjoys what I write.
Well, I mean, if it's any solace or consolation, they say that for every one person that feels a certain resonance towards something, there are at least 1,500 other people that feel or think the same way. So,
Hey, there you go.
yeah, I just wonder if it's for every one of those people, there are 1,500 people.
Who knows?
You're probably like, hopefully, because that means I'm going to sell so much copy. Oh,
That's the goal.
yeah. Oh man. So um would you say that going into this, you you doing this, are you personally doing this full time now, or do you have a separate occupation?
um, yes and no. I'm a full-time artist and author, so I'm self-employed.
Okay.
but I do split my time. And right now I'm thinking moving the bulk of it to my writing, but I am still a artist. So I do paintings and I've, show them in galleries and sell them and do custom work that way. That kind of helps balance my income.
Ah, so so you so both of your occupations could be considered an imaginary job.
Yes, exactly. Together, they're mostly real.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, because a lot of people when becoming, someone who does something in a creative, you know, vein of work, a lot of the time they combat things like people telling them, "When are you going to get a real job?" Which to me, I was like, "Oh my God, you mean I have an imaginary job that pays me real money?" Um, wait, what, if anything, would you say you have as sort of a clap back to people who think that way?
I mean, I guess what we can say is, you know, I have a job that I enjoy, that I'm passionate about, that I'm willing to do outside normal hours because, again, I find it fun. And again, makes you money too. Does yours.
Yes, it's like, hey, so yeah, I have an imaginary job. Plus, I mean, if we didn't do this, what would people have to read or listen to
Exactly.
or
There has
watch?
to be someone out there to write and be creative. Because
Like,
even if it's a person who's like, well, I only like watching TV shows or movies and I don't ever pick up a book, I'm like, you do realize someone writes those scripts. That's another form of writing. And a lot of those are based off books. So someone was the source.
exactly. They came from somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
most likely somebody's bookshelf.
Exactly.
Yes. So yes, my job is imaginary, and you're welcome. Yeah, you're nice. Oh man. So ooh, let's see. So what would you say about the fact that I notice that you're juggling two series.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that that is one of the things that keeps you creatively active and from falling into any kind of slump because you're able to variate?
Yeah, I kind of, depending on what my goals are, since the novellas are really quick, I'll write a number of them and then switch back over. The downside of switching between series is sometimes you have to reread the prior one or get back in the mood and refresh all the little details, make sure you remember whose eyes are blue and whose are brown.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it is fun because it kind of gives you a little distancing and you come back fresh. So I may write a novella for the first draft, but be working on a third draft of the other series. And again, like you said, it's fun. It keeps it prevents it from getting boring or mundane and a little challenging too, just to make sure you're on top of all the little details.
Yeah. And would you say that some people have a challenge when it comes to being able to write people of the opposite gender a lot of the time? Would you say that you at all have found it challenging or no?
I'm sure there are plenty of ways for me to improve on that, but I personally don't necessarily find it challenging. Uh, the bigger challenge for me is I have a lot of characters, some even for my first series, my main character, who are not human. And so you want to get in a mindset and make these characters in a way, some way relatable to the audience and keep them true to the fact that when you're writing something that's not human, they think differently, they act differently, they may speak differently, their view of the world is totally foreign. So that I think is more of a challenge for me, but it's kind of a fun challenge.
Yeah. I find that it's so weird. I find that one of the one of the biggest helps to me as far as like being able to write semi new sort of supernatural based characters as far as their view on the world and how it's slightly different has been watching like some of my younger nieces and nephews and how they will call things something completely different than we
Oh yeah.
might. What, if any, aid have you used from your personal environment to do that for you?
Well, kind of my first series, my main character was an animal shifter. They're called theriomorphs in the books, and her alternate form is a white tigress. And so, getting in her mind, I was able to pull because I have a lot of background in animal behavior.
Yeah.
And so, getting into the mind of how animals think, and different animals think different ways, and how they approach um, the world and their different senses, and to what extent some of them are better, at senses of smell or sight or quote unquote night vision. I could pull on that and then make the theriomorphs a little more real to the fact that they aren't human. They are in some way part beast, even when they're in a human form.
Yeah. And I find that so interesting too, because that calls back to a thought I was having about werewolves or lichens,
Mm-hmm.
and how, a lot of the time dogs have this sixth sense
Mm-hmm.
of being able to discern people's characters, and I've found that in a lot of shifting mythology they don't necessarily pay attention to like actual intrinsic animal behavior.
Yeah.
So would you say that that was an innovation that you've made that you hope to see in more fiction moving forward?
Well, yeah, when it comes to, I guess, in particular, shifter fantasy, if you're doing animal shifters, especially animals that do exist versus like dragons,
Mm.
but I like, and I will flag, I guess it goes back to one of your earlier questions. Have you read anything that you're like, throws you out? It's stuff
Yeah.
when you write a shifter and they write something wrong.
Mm.
Like the animals don't act anything that, no. That will bug me and throw me out. But I also know more than the average bear when it comes to animal behavior. So I may not be the average person. It may not throw the average person, but because I do have that background knowledge, I will find that irksome when I read something like, that's not how, no, that is absolutely wrong. Correct.
So you hope to see more more.
It would be nice. It would be nice if, to keep a little more true to if you're writing a wolf character or versus a bear.
Yeah. So it's like keep it character centric.
Yeah.
And what, if anything, would you say you have done in writing, like just characters in general, that you feel is more character centric and has actually made your characters more engaging?
I'm trying to character centric. Sorry, I have a squeaky door back there. Give me an example so I can I'm trying to figure out how to answer, but I need like an
Well,
example.
well, because a lot of people, when they go into a story, a lot of the time, especially writing fantasy, it's very story oriented, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a tendency to leave a lot of character development by the wayside just so it's all story. What, if anything, would you say you have done to bring your characters more forward so you have an equal story to character ratio? I guess would be a better
It's
question.
I will have to say I'm probably a little more action forward. I will admit that, but I do think it is important, especially when you have whatever your collection of main characters are, or the central characters, to make sure that they all evolve in some way from the beginning to the end. Some changes that will affect them, good, bad, or ugly. I think that is important that someone can see. They may be subtle ones or they could be extremely drastic, but that does, again, allow them to be a little more tangible. And also, always concentrate that, if you give a character, I think all characters should have some kind of quirk and or flaw, because no one's perfect.
Yeah.
So make sure you incorporate that and utilize that in some way, shape, or form.
And would you say that George R. R. Martin talks about his how he finds that he's able to differentiate characters as well as he's able to is his exercise of empathy and how, you know, his endeavor to be as understanding of not only himself but others as well as he's possibly able causes him to be able to set characters apart from each other. Would you say that a similar philosophy is what you
Yeah, each character you have to figure out what their core personality traits are. And again, each character views the world differently. If you have a character that's very rigid in rules and laws and black and white, you know, they may end up being almost villainous when it comes to a scenario where um, the law is actually hindering something good. And so that does allow your characters to be more dimensional, is when you have to think of, okay, remember, they don't think exactly like you, or at least not all of them. You have to have characters view the world slightly different. And so it's nice to, I guess, like you said, empathy, understanding other people's point of view, and then incorporating those other points of view into the book as well.
and speaking of villains, you said some characters may be perceived as slightly villainous in their motivations. What would you say has been the best way or innovative way that you have portrayed any kind of villainous character in your stories?
Um, I mean, each series I approach them differently. I like to have multiple if I can. And sometimes I like to have the traditional, okay, obviously not good. But I also like to have the characters that, you know, surprise you and realize they're not great, or someone that you perceive as evil or an extreme antagonist. And then later on, you're a little more like-minded. You may not be see eye to eye, be a little more like-minded. So it's nice to incorporate all of them in different ways. And if I can have those different personalities all in the same series, that's great. May not always be the case, but yeah.
And do you have any favorite characters in your series personally, or are you one of those I can't choose between my brain children kind of people?
I definitely have different types that I like. Again, going back to the point of, I like the warrior woman. I like uh, showing females that can be physically strong and not just the intellectuals and not just, you know, the empathetic people, but yeah, we can fight too with the best of them. So I do have those, and they all seem to be different facets of me in a sense. And so because of that, I do have an attachment with all those different characters throughout the different series. But no, I am drawn to strong women, but I love villains. And I love creating like different kind of villainous entities, which is flip side. Hopefully I'm not villainous in my life, but I do like a good villain. I always have liked a good villain. I prefer Lex Luthor to the Superman just because he's more fascinating to me. But if I had to picking one, I'll pick one that's maybe not a main character. I'll pick Yenna from my first series, the Incarn Saga. She is this powerhouse woman in a realm where it's a patriarchal society, but she carves her own matriarchal mark on the world, and she does not take no for the answer. So I do like her.
Yeah. Oh man, and yeah, I would definitely have to say that, like you said about writing villain characters, it's a little more, I guess, I don't know, engaging because it's enjoyable, because it helps you to step outside of yourself. Would you say that that is what you enjoy most about storytelling? Is the ability to step outside of yourself when telling a story?
Little different. I will say I prefer the idea of immersing myself in a world that in some way I kind of wish I existed in.
Yeah.
There's something about this world, this reality that I'm like, man, wouldn't that be neat? Now, to counter that, I do deal with a lot of war books, and not to say I want to be in the middle of a war in my backyard, but there's something alluring about having uh, a world, a universe that magic exists.
Yeah.
I growing up with things like Neverland or Alice in Wonderland or whatever, these kind of alternate realities that people can slip in. I think that's kind of fun when I write.
And would you agree that being able to do this in its own way is a form of magic?
Ooh, I might have to say that now. No, I was gonna. Oh well, I think that is kind of neat concept. I've never thought of it that way before, but I do like the idea that taking someone, allowing them to give an escape, give them a new reality to exist in, even momentarily. Yeah, I could say that.
Yeah, yeah, and because I mean, I think that, and sometimes when people ask me what I do for a living, I tell them I'm a transdimensional physicist.
Ooh, okay.
Because you're able to build these teleportation devices that people can hold in their hand, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I feel like in a way that this is some kind of I guess you could say alter dimensional or otherworldly ability, being able to transport people to places and teach them things and introduce them to people they wouldn't know otherwise without your perspective. Would you say that that was one of your leading motivations to becoming a storyteller, or
I wish. No, well, I do like the concept of when I write these stories, people experience novelty. So something new they haven't experienced before. Again, it's that take them away. And if you can catch someone and actually touch their emotions, be it make them super happy, angry, mad, sad, if they can actually, you get that emotional reaction, then you got something there. So that's kind of the thing is write in a way where people get so immersed that their emotions are now invested.
yeah.
That's kind of
And oh man, which actually just a beautiful segue brings me to the next point. Um, first lines. Okay,
okay.
a lot of people, when I mean, because this is I personally think that this is one of the most crucial things to capturing readers is the first line, at least. Because I mean, you might have a beautiful cover, and cover art is really important, and the synopsis on the back, yeah, but a lot of us have a tendency to open the book and read at least the first 5 lines before we decide, okay, yes, this is the one that's coming home with me. Would you say that you personally exercise nabbing the reader within the first line?
It is something that I always challenge myself to do and then hopefully do better the next time because I'm not as confident with it, but I do know the importance of it and I have tried and still do try to make sure whatever first sentence is uh, eyebrow raising or something to be captivating in some way to again pull them in because kind of like you said, cover makes them open the book, the first sentence makes them read the paragraph, hopefully the chapter, etc., so on. So it is a very important skill to have to get that oh moment when they read that first line or word sentence. Yeah.
Yeah, and how Tolkien put it was, he said, I always assume that the reader who picks up any of my work is having the worst day imaginable. So I write my first line with that assumption.
That makes sense.
So would you encourage more people to go at it from that perspective and think maybe that would improve people executing their first lines?
I think depends on your genre. If you're trying to do something that's fun or adventure forward like Tolkien, I could see that. But if someone's doing like a truly dark, grimdark horror, you might want to not make someone in a bad day feel better. It may be better to approach it and just be uh, jarring in a different way. But I think it does depend on your genre. But it's a nice way to think of um, when your reader picks it up, doesn't matter what mood, or maybe it does matter what mood, but just try to get them invested in some way.
And what, if any way, do you say that you moving forward? Because I mean, these are the first books in your series. What, in any way, would you say that you moving forward are taking steps to engage readers and keep them reading?
Well, with the my young adult series, each book is a different year for the girls, so I want people to enjoy it, get invested, and kind of go along her journey with her as she progresses through her life and through these adventures. And losing my train of thought. But yeah, no, I totally lost my train of thought. Can you repeat the question?
I said, what if anything would you say you're doing to keep your readers engaged and keep them reading as you're moving forward because you're writing series?
Yes. Well, kind of like, well, I guess I'll actually approach it a different way. Going back to the series and making sure each book has their satisfactory ending, I am a person who likes to do leave a little bit of a cliffhanger in some way, shape, or form. With my full lengths, that's a little bit more of the epilogues, because I like to incorporate epilogues and prologues, and when I do, they're usually from an outside perspective, maybe a character you haven't met yet, or some obscure third person, but give them a little taste and just something subtle where you know the story is continuing on, so it keeps them engaged. With my novellas, sometimes there's usually, again, just a little bit of something that we haven't reached the goal, a reminder of what the end game is, and here's where we are. So we're not there yet. So again, it keeps the readers interested and hopefully reading the next book or novella or whatever when it comes out.
And how trustworthy would you say you are about keeping main characters alive?
Depends on the age bracket. With my young adult, you can be pretty confident that though there will be characters that will not make it, very few. The older ones, I cannot guarantee. Well, I do write, now I will admit, I do write from one person's perspective. Though I have a lot of other main characters, you only see, so far they're all women, her perspective. So yes, she will hopefully make it till the end, because that's your perspective. Now that may change going forward, but any of the other characters that you love, just love them. And if they don't make it, we can work together.
So you would encourage people to get as completely attached to all of your characters as possible so that they can feel the full impact?
I mean, I prefer it that way, but I understand when people want that little warning label because they do want to distance themselves. But I mean, when it comes to life, you have to understand you never know what's around the corner. Something tragic could happen to anybody. So love the person to the fullest, love the character to the fullest, because you never know.
Yes.
Sorry for heartbreak, but
but as authors, we can't help ourselves but be like, oh, what if this
exactly
to this person?
I'm more of a person as again, when the story starts telling itself and I realize a character that I really like is not going to make it, I get really sulky. I get sulky for a couple of days and I'm like, oh, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for this.
Do you find that you argue with your story sometimes when it decides that it wants to make a decision and you don't necessarily want something to happen?
Maybe not full on argument, but I sometimes have felt like I try to take the reins again and steer it back to where I think it should go. So far, I've not been successful with that, and so I just, like in that mentality of, okay, well, it's going this way. We just buckle up and let's go for the ride. But it can be irksome sometimes.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man. I mean, I can't count how many times I've been just sitting, with my notebook and I'm working and it's like and they're like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I really didn't want this to happen, but the story said so."
I know. I felt that.
Why? Oh man. So you would say definitely that you and your story are, I don't know, collaborative?
For the most part, yes. I mean, I will get shocked sometimes of where what twists may occur, or what subplots might pop up there. But for the most part, and I'll have to say, in the end, I've been satisfied with the ones I've actually completed. So I guess I have to say we have to work together, be it the story and the writer.
This is a partnership. I let you
Exactly.
here. Oh. So, what, if anything, would you say has surprised you about either of your stories, not just as a writer, but almost like how it would surprise a reader?
Okay. Surprise me about the stories. Um, Sometimes I guess it depends, but when a character's backstory reveals itself, sometimes it can be, it's surprising when you're like, oh, this is why you were the way you were. I was writing it with this point, but then a new level comes out and it just works, and it's just like, wow, or it makes sense and things connect all of a sudden. You're like light bulb. But I
Yeah.
think that's kind of fun because it is really neat when you can 4 books in all of a sudden tell even more about a character that you thought you knew everything about, but you didn't, and now of course the readers didn't. So kind of gives them a little surprise as well as you.
Yes. So so because I think one of the most irritating things to ask writers is, where do you get your ideas from? Because honestly, I think, well, I mean, to ask myself, it's like I have no idea. They just show up and I do things with them because they're here. Um,
Exactly.
would you say that you operate on a similar philosophy, or do you draw your inspiration from specific things?
Each one has come to pass differently. My first one was actually based off a dream of myself in a military setup, and at one point, as I'm being chased through the facility and the premise, I transform into a white tiger, and so that kind of stuck. For whatever reason, that stuck, and I couldn't get it out of my head. And then all of a sudden, I realized there's a story here, and that's when it came into being. Going back to the 12 tasks, again, that's through my childhood play with my sister. So we developed those over a span of number of years, just going back and forth and fleshing out these characters and their backstories. The Guardian Speakers, I think because I was into mythology and then reading about Fulgia, I was like, wow, that's so neat. Why hasn't anybody ever
Yeah.
written about them? And I was like, oh, wait, give me a
Yeah.
moment. Give me a moment. I'll be back to you. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I would have to say that's probably one of the best things about doing, anything creative, whether you're an artist or, you're a writer, you get an inspiration and you're like, why has no one painted this yet? Wait,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I will do that. Thank you, me. I will put this on my wall, or I will give myself this thing to read. Would you say that that is also one of the most enjoyable things about being a creative person?
Oh yeah, I was going to the 12 tasks. Back when I was younger, I had like a vision what I thought the perfect guy was, and so I have to now go back to that mindset. Changed over the years, but I get to recreate, 13-year-old or 15-year-old me, what that ideal person would be, and so it's kind of like creating your own stories and your own realities, and that is kind of fun.
Yeah, because a lot of people, when getting started, they're looking for, what story should I tell? A lot of the time, and I would have to say probably one of the best advice I've I've gotten, and I've heard it repeated to several people, is write what you want to read. Would
Mm-hmm.
you say that you go from a similar?
Oh yeah, I always like writing stories that, if I'm not going to enjoy it, why am I going to write it? Why am I going to spend all those hours and months
Yes.
dedicated to something if I don't like it? You know, sure, someone else might, but I mean, in part, you have to be true to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. and maybe there will be 1,500 other people for the one that is you.
Yep, exactly.
Oh, well, I am not going to keep you here for too much longer. But I'm going to say thank you for coming on here because this has been absolutely amazing. Do you have a pin in when your next release?
I have my next release. Let me pull up the release date. You think I would know, but my head slips with all these dates. Bear with me. Okay, June 18th will be the next release of the Guardian Speaker, which is my Viking series.
Okay.
So in a few weeks, it's a countdown now.
Yay! Okay. So we might have you back sooner than later.
There we go.
Hey, okay. Or just have you back to talk mythology and all of that.
There you go. And the sequel to the 12 Tasks, I'm hoping I can release it later this fall. It just depends how quickly I can get it to my editor and turn it around. So tentatively, you'll see the second one of that later on this year as well.
Okay. Awesome. So yes, all the links for that are going to be in the description so people can go and find you and all of your amazing work. I do have one last question for you though. It's a would you rather question.
Okay.
Would you rather be a noun or an adverb? And out of either, which one would you be?
Okay, noun or adverb. I would be I think, okay, the word I would choose is inspiration.
Okay.
I like that. I think that's a good one because I like the concept of being inspired, but also inspiring others. So I think inspiration would be my choice.
That is you in a nutshell. So yes, everyone, good to go. Read your stuff and be inspired.
There you go.
Hopefully bring fun and ferocity back to storytelling.
Perfect.
Yes. Well, we will have you on here again. It has been amazing, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm so happy you've been here.
All right. Bye.
Bye.